必将遭到全面和彻底的试探。
主义的火炬照亮人类前行之路。
不断崛起、不断扩大的国际影响力。
Victor Gao, Chair Professor at Suzhou University, joins us live from Beijing. Now, thank you so much for joining us, Prof. It's a patriots-only election this time, insisted by China. In fact, Hong Kong's legislature has been operating without an opposition since November last year, and many opposition legislators and election organizers are in prison awaiting trial. So do you think in an election during such a situation, is there any room for opposition in Let's Go?
Well, first of all, elections are very important in Hong Kong. What the national security law has brought about is not whether there will be elections or not in Hong Kong, but who will be qualified to run in the elections. What will be the minimum threshold of qualification? For example, patriots have the qualification to run. But who is a patriot? In the Hong Kong context, if you do not support the one country, two system, if you do not acknowledge that Hong Kong is part of China, you are not a patriot. So this is the minimum requirement. I think on that basis, you are qualified and you can be an opposition party. For example, if you are opposed to a government policy, one kind of another, that should not be a problem. I think the key is that those who are running for public offices should at least acknowledge the one country, two system, which is the cardinal law in Hong Kong, and also acknowledge that there is only one China and Hong Kong is part of China. That's, I think, as decent as anywhere else in the world. In the United States, you need to pledge an allegiance to the United States. You need to be ready to defend against enemies, both at home or abroad. That's the American version of patriots running for their public offices.
Now, well, what you say is theoretically right. You know, there is space for opposition to come on board. Only 3 out of the 153 candidates contesting have identified themselves as pro-democracy or independent. So do they stand any chance of being elected then?
No, I don't think anyone who advocates so-called independence of Hong Kong, for example, will be qualified. Now, if they call themselves independent in the sense that they are independent in their political views, while they support the one country, two system, while they support that there is only one China, Hong Kong is part of China, I don't think that should be a problem. That should not be a disqualifying factor for them. But the minimum that they need to be committed is that they need to swear allegiance to China as the sovereign country. They need to swear allegiance to Hong Kong SAR as the legitimate government in Hong Kong, and they need to acknowledge that there is only one China and Hong Kong is part of China. In that sense, anyone who advocates independence of Hong Kong or splitting Hong Kong away from China should be barred from running any public office in Hong Kong.
Now, many candidates have also vowed to help solve Hong Kong's housing crisis. Why is this a major issue for voters then?
Well, I would say this is a legacy problem left over by the British rule before 1997, and there has not been significant or profound improvement ever since 1997. Hong Kong is a highly densely populated region, very small in terms of the land area, and very dense population. And the British Hong Kong government never cared about developing large tracts of land like in the New Territory, for example, and they concentrated their development in the Hong Kong island, resulting in the fact that lots of people do not have decent spaces to live in. And the property development is also skewed towards more expensive apartments, catering to more wealthy people, for example, resulting in large proportions of the people living either in very, very squeezed space, or they couldn't afford a decent living space to start with. This problem is a hindrance to Hong Kong's productivity and efficiency, and this needs to be resolved as soon as possible. I think the central government in China and the Hong Kong SAR government have reached understanding that resolving the housing crisis should be a top priority for Hong Kong. It's mostly a job up to the Hong Kong SAR government to handle, but I would say the Chinese central government will be ready to pitch in whatever way possible to make sure that people in Hong Kong will have decent amount of living spaces to live as a minimum requirement. This is what a modernized city like Hong Kong should provide to its population.
Well, in this election, observers say that there may be a low voter turnout, but the government doesn't really seem to be concerned about this.
Well, a low voter turnout will be unfortunate. I hope people in Hong Kong will be very, very enthusiastic in taking part in political activities on the condition, for example, they do not advocate Hong Kong independence. They do not want to split Hong Kong away from China, and they do not use demonstrations and protests as an excuses to violate the law. Hong Kong has a very strong tradition of rule of law. Any public demonstrations and protests need to get police permit first. So you cannot just go onto the street and protest, for example, because that will be illegal, and that will not be part of the rule of law. It will be against the rule of law. Now, on that basis, I hope people in Hong Kong will give a premium to stability, because that's absolutely the environment needed for Hong Kong's continued development and growth. I'm pretty sure that people in Hong Kong eventually will settle down for this stability and development mode, and they will no longer see politics as a dividing line between those who are patriots in Hong Kong and those who are incentivized by foreign forces which are bent upon splitting Hong Kong away from China. Now, philosophically speaking, how can any political force anywhere in the world realistically expect that they can achieve the goal of splitting Hong Kong away from China? Hong Kong has always been a part of China. Even under British rule, it's part of China. And after 1997, it will forever be part of China. So those who are having second thoughts about Hong Kong independence, for example, they need to really wake up to the reality on the ground. Maintaining stability in Hong Kong is absolutely the top priority for Hong Kong's continued economic development and flourishing in Hong Kong.
Now, thank you so much for that insight. That was Victor Gao, a chair professor at Suzhou University.